Somewhere in the back of an old house on the morning after her 18th birthday, a black garbage bag landed on a girl's bed. She did not flinch. Outside, a kitchen window glowed yellow against the gray dawn. A woman stood at the sink, washing a pan that was already clean, round and round, her hands moving in slow circles because if they stopped, she would have to look up. She did not look up. In a hallway lined with 11 years of school photographs, a man with folded arms watched a stepdaughter pack. 2 pairs of jeans, a toothbrush, a photograph of a father she barely remembered. 5 hours north in a small town she had never heard of. An old cedar wardrobe sat in the back of a general store, locked, waiting. It had been waiting for 15 years. And on a dirt road outside that town, the wind moved through an oak tree in a backyard that nobody had visited. The garbage bag landed on her bed at 7 in the morning. Black. Industrial. The kind people use for yard waste. Roy stood in the doorway, arms folded, coffee mug in one hand. He didn't sit. He didn't soften his voice. He just looked at her the way a man looks at a stain he's been meaning to clean. Clothes, he said. Personal items. Leave the furniture. Sloane Brennan sat up slowly in the bed she'd slept in for 11 years. She was 18 years old. The morning of her birthday had been the day before. Roy had not said happy birthday. Adele had not said happy birthday. Nobody had said anything because everyone in that house had been counting down to this morning the way other families count down to Christmas. You have until noon, Roy said, and he walked away. Sloane sat there, hands in her lap, bare feet on the rug she'd had since she was 7. The garbage bag lay across her knees like a body, black plastic, cold, smelling faintly of pine cleaner because Roy had probably pulled it from the kitchen pantry as casually as he pulled a sandwich from the fridge. She didn't cry. She had stopped crying about Roy somewhere around her 13th birthday. Crying was a thing you did when you thought tears could change something. Sloane had figured out a long time ago that nothing in that house was gonna change. She got up. She packed. It didn't take long. 2 pairs of jeans, 4 shirts, underwear, a toothbrush, a hairbrush with most of its bristles still in place, her work shirt from the diner on Route 9, the one with her name stitched on the chest in red thread, and the photograph, the one she kept in the top drawer of her nightstand, the one she'd never let anyone touch. Her father, 24 years old, holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket, dark hair falling into his eyes, tired smile, strong hands. On the back in pencil, Caleb and Sloane, first week home. She slid the photograph into the front pocket of the duffel bag, the one place where it wouldn't get bent. Then she went downstairs. Adele was at the sink, washing a pan. The pan was already clean. Sloane could see that from the doorway. The bottom was dry on one side. The handle hadn't been touched. But Adele kept moving her hands in slow circles over the surface, round and round, like the motion itself was the only thing holding her up. Mom? Nothing. Mom, look at me. Adele turned off the water. She dried her hands, slower than she needed to. She folded the dish towel and set it on the counter. Then she picked it up and folded it again. Her mouth was pressed into a thin line. Her eyes were red at the edges, but her voice was flat. "You'll be fine. You're an adult now. I have $34. You have a job. I have a part-time job. They give me 12 hours a week." Adele said nothing. She picked up the towel and folded it for the third time. "Roy's right," she said. "It's time." Sloane watched her mother's face, and what she saw there wasn't cruelty. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was relief. Relief that the countdown was over. Relief that the daughter would be gone. Relief that the silence between them, which had grown thick and heavy for 11 years, would finally get to be permanent. Sloane picked up the duffel bag. She walked through the living room, past the couch where she'd done homework for a decade, past the television where Roy watched football every Sunday while she ate dinner standing up in the kitchen, because there was never a seat for her at the table, past the photograph on the mantel of Adele and Roy on their wedding day, the photograph that did not include Sloane. She opened the front door. She pulled it shut behind her. She did not look back. The car was a 2004 Honda Civic. She'd bought it for $800 with diner money. The check engine light had been on for 3 months. The passenger window didn't close all the way. There was a gap at the top that let in rain and cold air, and the smell of every parking lot she'd ever slept in. She threw the duffel bag in the back seat. She sat behind the wheel for a long time. A really long time. Because if she turned the key, it would be real. If she pulled out of the driveway, it would be over. 11 years in that house. The good years and the bad years. The Christmas mornings before Roy. The bedtime stories her mother used to tell when Sloane was small, back when Adele still touched her hair, still held her hand in parking lots. The mother she remembered didn't live in that house anymore. That mother had died somewhere around Sloane's 7th birthday, sometime after Roy. The woman at the sink with the clean pan was a stranger wearing her mother's face. Sloane turned the key. The engine coughed, caught, held. She drove away. The first night she parked at a Walmart on the edge of town. She leaned the seat back, used a wadded-up sweatshirt for a pillow. The sweatshirt smelled like her mother's laundry detergent. And that was the closest thing to a hug she got that night. She woke up 4 times. Once because a truck idled 2 spots over for half an hour before pulling away. Once because footsteps came down the row slow and deliberate and someone tried the door handle of the car next to hers. Once because a man in a hooded sweatshirt walked past her window and looked in, and she lay flat against the seat and held her breath until he was gone. The 4th time she woke up for no reason at all. She stared at the ceiling of the Honda and watched the sky turn from black to gray, and she thought about how the rest of her life might look exactly like this. Back seat, cold window, strangers in parking lots, no address, no people. The phone in her pocket said 5:43. She sat up, wiped her face, started the engine to get the heat going. She was 18 years old, and she had no idea where to go. The second day, she filled the tank for $9 at a gas station off the interstate. She ate a $1 cheeseburger in the parking lot and scrolled through job listings on her phone. Nobody was hiring, or nobody was hiring someone with no address. No references besides a diner manager who might not remember her name. No way to shower before an interview. She kept the photograph on the passenger seat. She talked to her father, not out loud, just in her head. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sorry I don't remember you. I'm sorry I'm scared. The photograph stared back. 24 years old forever. A baby in a yellow blanket. A tired smile. Caleb Brennan had died on a construction site when Sloan was 3. That was all Adele would ever say about it. There had been an accident. Caleb was gone. Don't ask questions. Don't bring it up. His father, Sloan's grandfather, a man named Eli, had died years before that. So Adele said. Before Sloan was even born, there were no grandparents on the Brennan side. There was only Adele's family, which was mostly Adele's sister, in another state, and Roy, who was not family at all, and the silence that had filled the house like furniture. Sloan had grown up believing she had no people. She had grown up believing the man in the photograph was the last living tie she had to anyone who'd ever wanted her. The third day, she parked at a rest stop under pine trees. She brushed her teeth in the bathroom, splashed water on her face, ate the last of the fries from the night before. Cold, stale. Sitting on the hood of the Honda with her legs dangling. She had $17 left. She had no plan. And then the phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. Area code from somewhere up north. She almost didn't answer. She almost let it go to voicemail. But something in her hand decided for her and she swiped the screen. Hello, Miss Brennan. Yes. This is Martin Hale. I'm calling from Hale and Associates regarding the estate of Eli Brennan. The pine trees blurred. The rest stopped blurred. Sloan held the phone to her ear and felt the world tilt half an inch sideways. My grandfather died a long time ago, she said. There was a pause. The lawyer cleared his throat. Miss Brennan, Eli Brennan passed away 6 months ago. He was 76 years old. He lived in a town called Cedar Falls, about 5 hours north of your listed address. That's not possible. He named you the sole beneficiary of his estate. That's not possible. My mother told me he died before I was born. I can assure you he did not. I met with him every year for the last 14 years. He came to my office every December to update his will. He always asked me the same question. Sloan closed her eyes. What question? He asked whether I'd been able to find you. The pine trees came back into focus. The wind moved them gently. A crow called from somewhere overhead. Sloan sat down on the curb of the rest stop because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. He was alive, she said. Yes, ma'am. He was alive my whole life. Yes. My mother told me he was dead. The lawyer did not say anything. He waited. He had probably been waiting a long time for this exact phone call, and he knew enough not to fill the silence. What did he leave me? A cabin. He built it himself. The property is paid in full. No liens, no outstanding taxes. He made sure of that. There are also some financial assets which I'd prefer to discuss with you in person. Sloan opened her eyes. Where? The address is 2 miles up Old Creek Road, just outside Cedar Falls. Take the left fork where the road splits. Mailbox with no name on it. I'll meet you at my office on the main street, across from the post office. Whenever you can come, Miss Brennan. A pause. Your grandfather has been waiting for you for a very long time. She hung up. She sat on the curb of the rest stop. She watched the pine trees for 20 minutes without moving. Her hands shook the whole time. He was alive. He had been alive when she was 6, and her mother told her, "Both your daddy's parents are gone, baby. It's just us now." He had been alive when she was 11, and Roy moved into the house, and the bedtime stories stopped. He had been alive when she was 15, and the school counselor asked if there were any other family members she could stay with. And Adele said, "No, there's no one." He had been alive last October, asking a lawyer whether anyone had found her yet, and nobody had told her. Nobody had told her. She got up. She walked to her car. She drove to a used bookstore in the nearest town. She sold 3 high school textbooks she'd kept for no reason, except that her mother had paid for them, and they had cost $40 each new. The bookstore gave her $18 in cash, enough gas to get north. She got back in the Honda. She put the photograph of her father on the passenger seat. She started driving. The suburbs thinned into strip malls. The strip malls thinned into farmland. The farmland thinned into nothing, just trees, 2-lane roads, the occasional gas station with 1 pump and a hand-painted sign. She stopped once for a bottle of water and a granola bar. She ate it standing next to the car, watching the sun move across a field that hadn't been planted yet. She thought about turning around. She thought about driving back to the Walmart and the rest stops and the parking lots and at least the parts of the country she knew. But she kept driving north, because the man at the law office had said, "Your grandfather has been waiting for you for a very long time." And nobody had ever waited for her before. Not in 18 years, not for 1 minute. So she drove. 5 hours of 2-lane roads and pine trees and small towns with 1 stoplight each. The radio cut in and out. The check engine light flickered twice and then steadied. She drank the last of her water somewhere around hour 4 and pulled into Cedar Falls just as the sun was dropping behind the ridges. The sign at the edge of town said, "Population 800 and something." The last digit had faded past reading. The town was small, not charming small, just small. A main street, a hardware store with the lights already off, a church, a diner, a post office that could have been a shed. The lawyer's office was already closed. 5:15. She'd come in the morning. She pulled into the only open parking spot and turned off the engine. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know anybody. She'd never been anywhere by herself before. So she got out of the car and walked toward the only place with the lights still on. A general store on the corner. The window said Callaway's in gold paint that had been touched up by hand sometime in the last decade. The bell over the door rang as she stepped inside. The woman behind the counter looked up. Gray hair, pulled back in a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. Reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. A face that had spent a lot of years outdoors and a lot of years smiling at people. She was stacking cans on a shelf when Sloan walked in. Cans of green beans, store brand, the boring kind. Her hands stopped. She looked at Sloane for about 3 seconds. Then she set the can down, carefully, like she'd been holding it in suspense. "You're Eli's granddaughter." Sloane stopped just inside the door. The duffel bag slid down her shoulder. "How did you know that?" "Because you look exactly like your father." The woman came around the counter. She didn't rush. She didn't reach out. She just walked over to Sloane the way a person walks towards something they've been expecting for a long, long time. She stopped about 3 feet away, folded her hands at her waist, studied Sloane's face the way you study a painting. "My name is Ruth Calloway. I was Eli Brennan's neighbor and his closest friend for the better part of 20 years. Sloane couldn't speak. "He talked about you every single day," Ruth said. "Every single day, for 15 years. Sloane's eyes burned. She bit the inside of her cheek so hard, she tasted copper. She was not gonna cry in this store. She was not gonna cry in front of a woman she'd known for 30 seconds. She had cried enough in the last 3 days. She had cried enough in the last 3 weeks. There was nothing left to cry with. And yet, here it came anyway, hot and pushing at her eyes. Ruth did not try to hug her. Ruth did not get emotional. Ruth looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Slow, certain. "Have you eaten today?" "I had a granola bar." "This morning, at lunch." Ruth turned, went behind the counter, came out a moment later with a brown paper bag. She set it on the counter and started filling it. Bread, peanut butter, a jar of jam, 2 apples, a bottle of water, a box of crackers, a bar of soap, a travel-sized toothpaste. She moved like a woman who had filled this bag 100 times before. "I can't pay for those," Sloane said. "Eli paid for them a long time ago." Sloane stared at her. "He left money at this store every month for 15 years. Said it was for when you came." Ruth pushed the bag across the counter. "I've been putting it aside." Sloane stepped closer. She picked up the bag with both hands. Her hands were shaking and she didn't try to hide it anymore. What was he like? Ruth leaned against the counter. He was a carpenter. Built houses for 40 years. He had a rough stretch after your father died. Pulled himself out. Stayed sober for the rest of his life. He spent every year after that working on the cabin. Built it with his own hands, every nail, every board, every joint. He used to say the cabin was the only thing he could finish. Why didn't he find me? Ruth's face softened. Oh, sweetheart. He tried. He couldn't have tried very hard. He tried everything anyone could think of. Lawyers, courts, letters, phone calls. He sat outside your mother's house in his truck and waited. He filed petitions. He hired investigators. He did everything except break the law. Ruth pressed her lips together. And in the end, the only thing he could do was build. Build what? A place worth coming to. Ruth came around the counter again. She put one hand on Sloane's shoulder. Just the lightest touch. Firm enough to be real. Light enough that Sloane could pull away if she needed to. "Before you go to the cabin," Ruth said, "I want to show you something." Ruth led her to the back of the store, past the freezer case, past the shelf of canned soup, past a door marked private. She unlocked the door with a key from her apron pocket. Inside was a storeroom, shelves of inventory, boxes of paper towels stacked to the ceiling, the smell of cardboard and dust. But in the back against the wall was a tall cedar wardrobe, old, hand-built. The kind of furniture you only see in farmhouses where a great-grandfather made it sometime around 1920. There was a brass plate on the door, engraved with neat script, for Sloan. Sloan's breath caught. Ruth turned the small key in the wardrobe lock. The doors swung open, and Sloan Brennan stared at what was inside, and her hand went to her mouth, and the duffel bag slid all the way off her shoulder and landed on the storeroom floor. Clothes, rows of clothes, hanging on wooden hangers, tiny ones. A pink dress for a 6-year-old, a heavier coat for a child of 9, hiking boots in 3 different sizes, a snowsuit, a graduation gown ordered in a small adult size, a wedding-style cardigan in cream wool hanging next to a folded scarf. On the shelves, books, picture books, chapter books. A copy of Little House on the Prairie with a bookmark in it as if someone had been planning to read it aloud. A copy of Anne of Green Gables. The cover faded from being held too many times by hands that did not belong to a child. A doll on the top shelf. Soft body. Yarn hair. A little blue dress. A baby blanket folded at the bottom. Yellow. Hand knit. The same color as the blanket in the photograph of her father. Ruth stood beside her. Her voice was very quiet now. He didn't know how big you were. Sloan stared. He didn't know what you'd like. He didn't know what season you'd come in. He didn't know if you'd come at 6, or at 16, or at 30. Ruth's voice broke just a little, just for a half second. Then steadied. So he bought everything. He bought a size for every year. He saved books he thought you'd love. He picked out that doll the year you turned 8. He said every little girl needs one. He didn't care that you were grown by then. He bought it anyway. He said maybe someday she'll have a daughter. Sloan reached out with one hand, touched the sleeve of a small green coat. The kind a child would wear at 12. The price tag was still on it. Brand new. Never opened. Never worn. She made a sound. A small broken sound. The sound someone makes when they finally understand that they have been loved in the dark all along by someone they were never told existed. Ruth stood beside her and did not move. After a while, Ruth said very gently, "Take whatever you want. It's all yours." Sloan shook her head. "I just want the blanket." Ruth nodded. She reached up, took the yellow blanket from the bottom shelf, folded it once, handed it to Sloan. Sloan held it against her chest. It smelled like cedar. It smelled like a man she had never met. It smelled like someone had been waiting for her. Ruth gave her directions before she left. 2 miles up Old Creek Road. Take the left fork where the road split. Mailbox with no name on it. The key would be in the lockbox on the porch. The combination was Sloan's birthday. Of course it was. Eli had known her birthday. Eli had known everything about her that Adele had let slip into the world. Sloan drove out of town with the yellow blanket on the passenger seat. The photograph of her father next to it. the brown paper bag of groceries on the floor. The road went from pavement to gravel, from gravel to dirt. The trees closed in on both sides until the sky was just a narrow strip overhead. The Honda's headlights caught the trunks of pine. The air through the broken window was cold and smelled like sap and wet earth. She almost missed the turn. The mailbox had no name, just a dented metal post. She took the left fork, drove another quarter-mile, and then the cabin appeared at the end of the road. Small. One story. A covered porch across the front with a railing that needed sanding. The roof was weathered. But even in the dying light, even from the driveway, she could see the craftsmanship. The door frame had hand-carved trim along the top, a pattern of leaves and branches that someone had spent weeks cutting into the wood. The kind of detail a man only puts into a house if the house is going to belong to someone he loves. She got out of the car. She climbed the porch steps. She found the lockbox, spun the dials to her birthday. The box clicked open. A brass key. Old, heavy, worn smooth by a hand that was no longer here. She turned the key in the lock. The door swung open without a sound. The hinges were oiled. Someone had been coming here, keeping things up, making sure that on the day Sloan Brennan finally walked through this door, nothing would creak. Nothing would stick. Nothing would feel like neglect. She stepped inside. The cabin smelled like cedar and dust. A small living room, a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a window over the sink, one bedroom, one bathroom. Everything built from the same warm-toned wood. Plain, smooth, fitted with a precision she had never seen in any house in her life. Every shelf level, every drawer flush. Nothing creaked. She set the duffel bag on the floor, set the yellow blanket on top of it, walked through the room slowly, touching things, running her hand along the shelves, opening drawers and watching them slide without catching, standing at the kitchen window and looking out at a backyard that was mostly weeds and one old oak tree with a thick trunk and low branches. There was a wooden chair by the fireplace, a small table beside it. No other furniture, no bed, no couch, just the chair and the table and a man-made space waiting for someone to fill it. She made herself a peanut butter sandwich. She ate it sitting on the floor of the living room, her back against the wall near the fireplace. The chair was right there. She could have sat in it, but she didn't, because the chair felt like Eli's chair and she had never met Eli, and it didn't feel right yet. She ate the sandwich slowly. She listened to the silence, and somewhere around the second bite, her hand went down to brace herself on the floor, and her fingers slid against the baseboard and something underneath them moved. She stopped chewing. She set the sandwich down. She turned around. The baseboard behind her was the same wood as the rest, same smooth finish, same warm tone. But it sat differently. Every other baseboard in the cabin was flush against the wall, tight, seamless. This one had a gap, uniform, exactly the same width all the way across. It wasn't from settling. It wasn't from warping. It was built to move. Sloane's heart started beating in her ears. She got on her knees. She pressed one end of the baseboard. Nothing. She pressed the other end. It slid sideways, on hidden tracks, smooth, silent, disappearing into the wall the way a drawer slides into a desk. Behind it was a compartment, cedar-lined, about 8 inches deep and 2 feet wide, built so precisely that the seam between the baseboard and the wall was invisible until you knew what to look for. Inside were 3 sealed envelopes, white, plain, each one labeled in neat, steady handwriting. Sloan, age 6. Sloan, age 7. Sloan, age 8. She sat back on her heels. She put both hands over her mouth. For a long time, she did not move. She just looked at the 3 envelopes in the wall. The 3 envelopes that had been waiting there for 12 years. The 3 envelopes that her grandfather had written and sealed and slid into a hiding place he built with his own hands, because he believed somehow against everything that one day she would come here and find them. She reached in. She took out the first envelope. Her fingers were trembling. She slid her thumb under the seal. It came open easily, the glue old and brittle. Inside was a birthday card. Simple. A drawing of a cake on the front. The kind of card you buy at a drugstore in the 2000s when the world was still mostly made of paper. She opened it. The handwriting inside was steady, slightly slanted. The handwriting of a man who had built houses for 40 years and could still hold a pen straight. Happy birthday, Sloan. I hope this one reaches you. I sent a card to your mother's house, but it came back like the others. So I'm keeping this one here instead. You are 6 years old today, and I have never stopped thinking about you. Not for one day, not for 1 hour. Your father would be so proud of the girl you are becoming. Even though I have not been allowed to see it. I love you, sweetheart. Grandpa Eli. Sloan Brennan sat on the floor of the cabin her grandfather had built, and she cried. Not quietly, not with any kind of composure. She pulled her knees to her chest and pressed the card against her heart, and she sobbed until her ribs ached, until her face was wet and her throat hurt. And the sound she was making did not even sound like her own voice anymore. He had not forgotten her. He had never forgotten her. He had been right here, the whole time, writing her name on envelopes she would never receive, buying clothes in sizes he could only guess at, picking out a doll for an 8-year-old who already had no idea he existed. She had grown up believing nobody wanted her. She had grown up believing she was a burden in a house that was barely tolerating her. And the whole time 5 hours north, a man had been writing her name in pencil on the back of birthday cards and slipping them into hiding places in the walls of a house he was building for the day. She would finally find her way home. She opened the second envelope. The card was almost the same. A picture of balloons. The same steady handwriting. Happy birthday, Sloan. You're 7 today. I drove past your mother's house last week. I parked the truck across the street and sat there for an hour. I could see your bedroom light on. I wanted to walk up and knock on the door. But the restraining order says I can't come within 200 feet. So I sat in the truck and watched your light until it went off. Then I drove home and wrote you this card. I love you, sweetheart. Grandpa Eli. She read it 3 times. She pressed her hand flat against the floor to steady herself. A restraining order. A man sitting in a truck across the street for an hour just to watch a bedroom light. A man not allowed to come within 200 feet of his own granddaughter. A man whose only crime by the sound of it was wanting to be in her life. She opened the third envelope. Happy birthday, Sloan. You're 8. I filed a petition with the court last month for visitation rights. The judge denied it. Your mother's lawyer said I was an unfit influence. I've been sober for 2 years now. But the things I did before that still follow me around. I'm going to keep trying. I will never stop trying. I love you. Grandpa Eli. She set the cards down on the floor. She put both hands over her face. The cabin was very quiet. Outside, the light through the kitchen window had gone from gold to orange to a deep, dusty rose. The sun was almost behind the trees. The room had grown dim around her, and she had not noticed. 3 cards. 3 years of a man trying to reach a granddaughter who didn't know he was alive. And those were just the first 3. Because if Eli Brennan was the kind of man who built a hiding place behind a baseboard for cards he had written when she was 6 years old, then he was the kind of man who had built more hiding places. He was the kind of man who had filled the walls of this cabin with everything he had ever wanted to say to her. She knew it. She felt it. The way you feel a hand on your shoulder in an empty room. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She picked up the cards. She put them back in their envelopes. Set them gently on the wooden chair by the fireplace. Because they belonged in this room now, out in the open, where they should have been all along. Then she sat back down on the floor. She leaned against the wall. She closed her eyes. And she said out loud into the dim quiet of the cabin the only thing she could think of to say. I'm here, Grandpa. The cabin did not answer, but somewhere outside the wind moved through the oak tree in the backyard. The branches creaked. A bird called once and went silent. The sun dropped the last inch behind the ridge. And Sloan Brennan, 18 years old with $34 in her pocket 3 days ago, and a yellow blanket beside her now, sat in the home a man had built for her and listened to the quiet of a place where finally somebody had been waiting. She slept on the floor that first night, on top of the duffel bag, the yellow blanket pulled over her shoulders like something a child would do. She was 18 years old, and she fell asleep clutching a knit blanket a man had bought for a granddaughter he never got to meet. And when she woke up in the morning, the first thing she saw was the 3 envelopes on the wooden chair across the room. They were still there. Of course they were still there. But part of her had been afraid she'd dreamed them. Part of her had been afraid she'd open her eyes and the cabin would be empty and Ruth Calloway would be a stranger. And the whole thing would dissolve into another morning in another parking lot. She sat up slowly. Her back hurt. Her neck hurt. She didn't care. She walked into the kitchen and turned on the faucet. The pipes coughed. Brown water sputtered out for 10 seconds. Then it ran clear, cold, fresh, from a well somewhere on this land that a man had drilled with his own hands. She splashed water on her face. She dried it on the corner of her shirt. She made coffee with the grounds and filters Ruth had packed in the bag. Eli's coffee maker was old, white plastic, the kind people had in the 1990s. She watched it drip into the carafe, and she thought about how he had stood here every morning for 15 years, and made coffee in this exact spot. Then she heard tires on gravel. She looked out the window. Ruth's truck was coming up the road. An old Ford, faded blue paint. The kind of truck that has lived a long life and still has work left in it. Sloane wiped her hands on her jeans, opened the front door, stood on the porch as Ruth climbed out of the cab, carrying a casserole dish in one hand and a paper bag in the other. "Morning," Ruth said. "Morning. Didn't want to come by too early. Figured you'd need a night to settle in." Ruth climbed the porch steps. She was wearing the same kind of work coat as the day before, just a different color. Chicken and rice. Nothing fancy. Sloane took the dish. It was still warm. She didn't know what to say. Thank you didn't seem big enough. Nothing seemed big enough. So she just nodded and stepped aside and held the door open, and Ruth came in like a woman returning to a house she'd visited 100 times. Because she had. Ruth set the paper bag on the kitchen counter, started unpacking it. Milk, eggs, butter. A loaf of bread that someone had baked by hand, the crust still soft. A wedge of cheese. A jar of strawberry preserves with a handwritten label. "You've been coming here every week," Sloane said. "Promised him I would." For 6 months. For longer than that. He had heart problems the last couple of years. I'd come up and check the pipes in winter. Bring him a meal if he was feeling poorly. The last few months, he couldn't really get out of the chair. Ruth set the milk in the fridge. I'd come up Tuesdays and Saturdays, make sure he ate, read him the paper. Sloane looked at the wooden chair by the fireplace, the one she still hadn't sat in. "He died in that chair." Ruth paused, hand on the refrigerator door. "He died in his bed, peaceful, in his sleep. He'd been ready for a while." She closed the fridge. "Last thing he said to me, the day before, he said, 'Ruth, when she comes, tell her I waited.'" Sloane swallowed. She set the casserole on the stove. She turned away, pretended to wipe down a counter that was already clean, because that was the thing her mother used to do. The thing her mother had done the morning Sloane left. Wiping clean counters, washing clean pans, doing busy work with your hands when you couldn't look at someone. And it occurred to Sloane, standing there with the rag in her hand, that maybe her mother had been doing that for years. Wiping down clean counters because she couldn't bring herself to look at her own daughter. Couldn't bring herself to look at the face of a man she had buried at 24. Couldn't bring herself to look at any of it. The thought slid in sideways. She didn't want it. She pushed it down. Not yet. Not yet. They sat at the small table by the fireplace, Sloane in the wooden chair, because Ruth had gestured toward it like it was no big deal. And Sloane had sat in it without thinking, and only after her back hit the wood did she realize. She was sitting in her grandfather's chair. It fit her, like it had been built to. Maybe it had been. Ruth pulled an upturned crate over from the corner, sat down across from her, cradled a coffee mug between both hands. "Tell me about him," Sloane said. Ruth took a long breath. "Eli Brennan was the most stubborn man I ever met. And I grew up in this town, so I have seen some stubborn men." She smiled just a little. He built houses for 40 years. Started with his own father at 14. Could frame a wall with his eyes closed. could measure a board by feel. What about my dad? Ruth's smile softened. Caleb. Lord, what a kid. Tell me. He was bright. He was funny. He was kind to a fault. He learned everything from Eli. Had his own little business in his 20s. Small residential work, decks, kitchens. Loved a finished kitchen the way some men love a finished football game. Ruth's eyes drifted to the window. He met your mother at a friend's wedding. They were both 20, crazy about each other from day one. He used to drive 5 hours just to see her on weekends. My mother loved him. Honey, your mother adored him. Sloane looked at her hands. She had never heard anyone in her life describe her mother as adoring. The Adele she'd grown up with was a woman of folded dish towels and turned away faces and silence at the kitchen counter. Not a woman who had once been 20 and adored a boy. What happened to him? Ruth set her coffee down. She did not speak for a moment. She was choosing her words. Eli had a heart problem. He needed surgery. The insurance wouldn't cover it all. There was a $12,000 gap. Caleb took a job he shouldn't have taken to close that gap. A high-rise construction project 60 miles south of here. 3 times the money of his usual residential work. Bad reputation for safety. Eli begged him not to take it. Caleb said, "Dad, you raised me. Let me take care of you for once." "Oh," Sloane said. Quiet. 3 weeks into the job, the scaffolding gave way. Caleb was 4 stories up. Ruth's voice was steady, but her hand on the mug had gone tight. He didn't survive the fall. He was 24 years old. Sloane closed her eyes. She felt the room around her. The wood Eli had cut. The chair Eli had built. The cabin Eli had spent 15 years constructing because he could not stop building. Because if he stopped building, he would have to feel the thing that had killed his son. He blamed himself, she said. It wasn't a question. Every day for the rest of his life. Ruth's voice cracked just barely. He believed his bad heart killed his boy. He believed if he hadn't needed that surgery, Caleb would have stayed in residential work, kept his nice, safe little business, watched you grow up. He carried that with him until the morning he died. He drank. He drank for 2 years, hard, mean, wasn't himself. He'd show up at your mother's door in the middle of the night, 3 sheets to the wind, just wanting to see you. Your mother was 24 years old, with a 3-year-old baby and a dead husband, and a drunk father-in-law banging on her door at midnight. She couldn't take it. She got a restraining order. Eli told me later it was the best decision she ever made. He said, "Ruth, if I'd been her, I would have done the same." Sloane sat very still. She thought about Adele at 24. She had never thought about Adele at 24 before. Her mother had always just been her mother. A flat, finished thing. A woman in a kitchen with red-rimmed eyes who never spoke about the past. But once somewhere there had been a 24-year-old girl who had loved a boy named Caleb. And that girl had buried him. And that girl had been left alone with a 3-year-old and a grief she did not know how to carry. And someone had come pounding on her door at midnight, drunk and angry and broken, and she had been afraid. Sloane felt something move inside her. Not forgiveness, not yet. Just understanding. A small, hard, reluctant understanding. How did he get sober? Ruth lifted her head. One morning, he showed up at my store at 6 a.m. clean-shaven, wearing a button-down shirt I'd never seen on him before. He looked at me across the counter and he said, "Ruth, I made a promise to my son. I intend to keep it." "What promise?" "To take care of you." Sloan breathed out. He never drank again after that day. Not a drop. He went to meetings in the next town 3 times a week for the rest of his life. He filed for visitation a couple of years later. The judge denied it. He filed again. Denied. He filed again. Denied. After the 3rd time, he ran out of money for lawyers. He stopped going to court, but he didn't stop trying. Honey, Eli Brennan never stopped trying. He just changed how he tried. Ruth gestured around them, at the walls, the shelves, the kitchen, the cabin that had been built 1 nail at a time over a decade and a half. He built instead. After Ruth left, Sloan started looking. She knew there was more. She knew it the way you know the rest of a song after hearing the first verse. The cabin was full of more. A man like Eli Brennan didn't build one hiding place and stop. A man like Eli Brennan filled every wall. She started in the kitchen. She opened every cabinet, pulled out every drawer, felt along the backs of shelves, looked under the sink, knocked on the wood. And under the sink where the plumbing came down from the counter, there was a panel. A single piece of wood. Same grain as every other panel in the kitchen. So flush you'd never notice it. She pressed along the bottom edge. The panel tilted forward on a hidden hinge. It swung down, revealing a space behind the pipes. Inside were 6 more envelopes. Sloan Brennan sat down on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets, and she opened them one by one. Ages 9 through 14. 6 years of birthday cards. Each one written in the same steady handwriting. Each one tucked with a folded bill inside. A 20. A 20, a 50. A 20. A 50. 100. Birthday money she had never received. Saved up in cards she would never see. Until now. She counted it. $380. She set it on the floor beside her, and tucked behind the envelopes pushed all the way to the back of the compartment was something else. A small wooden box, about the size of a paperback novel. Sanded smooth. Brass clasp on the front. Heavier than it looked. She lifted it out with both hands. She opened the clasp. Inside was a music box, a metal comb, a brass cylinder, fitted into a hollowed-out space with the precision of a man who had spent 40 years putting wood together. The whole thing rested on a tiny pad of red velvet that had been cut by hand to fit the exact space. She turned the small brass key on the side. It played a lullaby. She did not recognize the tune. It was slow, gentle. The notes filled the quiet kitchen, plinking out one at a time, and she sat on the floor and let it play until it wound down. Then she lifted the lid all the way back to see the inside. On the inside of the lid, 5 words were burned into the wood. I made this for you. Sloan sat on the kitchen floor of the cabin her grandfather built, and she held a music box he had carved for a granddaughter he never met. and she let the lullaby play until the brass cylinder spun to silence. Then she wound it again. She closed her eyes. For a moment, the cabin did not feel empty. For a moment, she could almost feel him sitting beside her on the kitchen floor. A big man, calloused hands, a face she only knew from the photograph on the passenger seat of her car. Not even his face, just the shape of him, the presence of him, waiting. He had been waiting a long time. She slept in the bed that night, Eli's bed. The mattress was old, but clean. The sheets had been changed recently. Ruth had clearly been keeping the cabin ready. Sloane crawled under the quilt and pulled the yellow blanket up over her shoulders and slept for 10 hours. She did not dream. When she woke up, the morning light was coming through the bedroom window in long, warm bars across the floor. Birdsong outside. The air through the cracked open window was cool and smelled like pine. She got out of bed. She went back to looking. The bedroom panel was on the wall opposite the window. Same wood, same finish. But when she put her palm flat against it and pushed, it moved. Just barely. She worked her fingers around the edges until she found the catch. A small wooden button recessed into the trim at the bottom corner. She pressed it. The panel swung inward like a door. The compartment behind was deeper than the others. Inside were 2 stacks of envelopes tied together with kitchen string. She pulled them out, sat down on the bedroom floor, untied the first stack. These were not birthday cards. These were letters, plain white envelopes, each one addressed in Eli's handwriting to Adele Brennan, each one with the address of the house Sloane had grown up in, each one stamped in heavy red ink in handwriting Sloane knew. Return to sender. The handwriting was her mother's. Her mother had written that on every envelope. Her mother had taken them out of the mailbox. Read the return address, stamp them, and put them back out for the postman. For 15 years. Sloane untied the string with shaking hands. She opened the first letter. Adele, I am sober. I have been sober for 8 months now. I am asking you, please, let me see my granddaughter. I will come to your house. I will meet in a public place. I will do whatever you need me to do. I will sign anything. She is my son's daughter. Caleb would want her to know me. Please. Eli. The next one, a year later. Adele. I filed the paperwork. My lawyer says we have a real case. I'm not trying to take her from you. I just want to see her once a month. One afternoon. That's all I'm asking. Eli. The 5th one. Adele. I know you read these before you send them back. The postmark shows they're opened. I don't understand what I have done that is so terrible. Caleb is gone. Sloane is all I have left of him. Please. The 11th one. Adele. I've stopped hiring lawyers. I've stopped going to court. It doesn't work and I can't afford it anymore. But I want you to know something. I haven't stopped. I will never stop. I'm building something for her. When she's old enough, she'll find me or I'll find her. One of those things will happen. I believe that. Eli. She read every single one. 15 letters. 15 years. And on every single envelope in her mother's handwriting, return to sender. Return to sender. Return to sender. A woman she had called Mom for 18 years had stood at a mailbox 15 separate times, had recognized the handwriting on each letter, had carried it inside, had probably opened some of them because the postmark showed they had been opened, had read what was inside, had picked up a red marker, and had written in her own hand that the man who wrote them should be sent away. Sloan laid the letters out on the bedroom floor, in a fan, like cards. She sat in the middle of them. She didn't cry this time. Something colder than crying was happening. Something quieter, like a door closing inside her chest. A door she had kept open for 18 years for a mother who had spent 15 of those years standing on the other side of a different door, slamming it shut on a man who only wanted to know his granddaughter. She put the letters down. She picked up the second stack. There was only one envelope in it, older than the others. The paper was yellowed at the edges, soft from handling. The handwriting on the front was not Eli's. It was a faster hand, less careful. The handwriting of a younger man. The envelope was addressed simply, Dad. Sloan stared at it for a very long time, because the handwriting belonged to a man who had been dead for 15 years. A man whose voice she could not remember. A man she had only ever seen in one photograph. And a memory so vague she couldn't be sure it was real. She opened the envelope. The paper inside was a folded piece of notebook paper, lined, the kind you'd pull out of a spiral binder. Dad, I know you don't want me taking this job. I know the site is bad and the foreman cuts corners, but your surgery is in 6 weeks, and the insurance gap is $12,000, and I am not going to let you skip it again. You raised me by yourself after Mom left. You taught me how to build a house from the ground up. You gave me everything you had and never complained once. So let me do this. I'll be careful. I promise. But if something happens, which it won't, take care of Sloan for me. Take care of my little girl. Promise me, Dad. Promise me. Caleb. The letter shook in her hands. She read it twice, 3 times, 4. Because her father's voice was here. On paper, written in his own hand. A man who had been 24 years old when he died had sat down at a kitchen table somewhere and written this letter to his own father. The week before he died. He had known. Some part of him had known. He had written, if something happens, take care of Sloan. And 6 days later, the scaffold had given way, and his father had spent the next 15 years trying to keep that promise. Sloan folded forward on the bedroom floor. She pressed her forehead against the wood. She made a sound that was not crying and not screaming, but something in between. Something a body does when it cannot hold what it has just been handed. She did not hear the front door open. She did not hear footsteps in the hall. But at some point Ruth was there, sitting on the bedroom floor beside her, not touching her, not speaking, just close enough that Sloan could feel the warmth of another person in the room. They sat like that for a long time. When Sloan could talk again, she handed Ruth the letter. Ruth put on her glasses. She read it. Then she took her glasses off and pressed her finger and thumb into her eyes, the way a woman does when she is trying very hard not to cry in front of someone who is already crying. "He never showed me this," Ruth said finally. "It was in the wall." "Of course it was." Ruth handed the letter back. "Eli carried Caleb's death every day. He believed it was his fault. His heart. His bills. His surgery." Ruth's voice was rough. "He could not let it go. And then your mother took you. And he lost both of them in the space of 2 years." Sloane refolded the letter along the crease her father's hands had made. She slid it back into the envelope. She held it against her chest. She fixed the porch that afternoon because she had to do something with her hands. She found Eli's toolbox in the closet. Clawhammer, set of chisels, hand plane, tape measure, level, everything clean, everything sharp, everything organized in a way that told her who her grandfather had been more clearly than any letter could. She sanded the rough spots on the railing. She checked the posts for rot. One was soft at the base. She'd need to replace it eventually. But for now, she could brace it. She worked until the lights started to fade. Then she heard tires on gravel coming up the dirt road. Sloane stood up, wiped her hands on her jeans, looked toward the bend. A pickup truck came around. Older model, dark green, the kind of truck that had hauled a lot of lumber. An old man got out, tall, lean, steel gray hair, a face like weathered cedar. He raised a hand, not a wave, a nod, the kind of greeting men in small towns use when words are too much. "You'd be Sloane," he said. "Yes, sir. Hollis Coleman." He stayed at the bottom of the porch steps, not stepping up, waiting to be invited. "Eli and I built half this county together. 40 years on the same crew. He talked about you. Every day." Sloane swallowed. She gestured toward the porch. "Want to come up?" Hollis climbed the steps slow. His knees were not what they used to be. He stopped at the rotten post and ran a hand down it. He didn't say anything. He just nodded once. Then he looked at her work on the railing. "You sanded with the grain." "Yes, sir." "Good." He didn't elaborate. He didn't praise. He just turned back to his truck. Came back a moment later with a length of lumber. Pressure-treated 4x4. Fresh cut. "Figured you'd need a new post. Had it sitting in my shop." "How did you know?" "Eli told me 2 years ago. Said this post would go before the others. Said when his granddaughter showed up, she'd want to fix the porch first thing, before she did anything else inside." Hollis set the lumber down on the porch. "Said you had his hands." Sloane stared at him. He did not look at her. He looked at the porch, ready to learn how to set a post. She nodded. Once. Because if she opened her mouth, something was going to come out and she did not know what. So she watched. She watched the way Hollis measured. The way he held a chisel like it weighed nothing. The way he braced his foot against a beam without thinking about it. The way his hands moved. And then she copied. Slow at first. Careful. She mismeasured the first cut. and he showed her without speaking how to mark wood with the side of a pencil instead of the tip. She made a notch too deep, and he tapped it gently with the back of his hand to show her where to ease off. When the new post was set and braced, he stepped back, looked at the work, looked at her. "Eli wasn't wrong," he said. "About what? Your hands." He picked up his hat, settled it on his head. "You need anything, you come to the shop, Main Street. Other side of the diner. Coleman Woodworks." He climbed back into his truck. He drove away, and Sloane Brennan stood on a porch she had partly rebuilt with her own hands, with a hammer that had belonged to her grandfather, and she watched the truck disappear down the dirt road. And for the first time in 3 days, she did not feel like a girl with nowhere to go. She felt like a girl with a doorframe behind her, built by people who had been waiting for her. The next morning, Marguerite Doyle came up the road, a woman in her 60s, tight gray curls, a grandmother's body. She drove a station wagon that had to be from 1996, and she brought a pie tin covered in foil. "Blueberry. Margie," she said. "Doyle. I run the diner across from the post office. My mama ran it before me. I made you a pie. Eli used to say a person isn't really home until somebody brings them a pie." She didn't come inside. She handed Sloane the tin on the porch. "Coffee's free at the diner. Don't argue." Then she turned and went back to her station wagon and drove away. Sloane stood on the porch holding the pie. She set it on the railing. She lifted the foil. She broke off a piece of crust with her fingers and ate it standing there. It tasted like a town that had been waiting for her, like 15 years of people who had known her grandfather, and now knew somehow that she was here. She didn't know how a place could love you before it met you, but this one did. She kept looking. That afternoon, she found another panel in the bathroom, behind the mirror. A whole shelf built into the wall stocked with shampoo and conditioner, and a fresh toothbrush in its package, and a hairbrush with a card taped to it that just said "for you." The day after that, she found a compartment under the windowsill in the bedroom, a small leather-bound notebook inside. She did not open it yet. She set it on the kitchen table next to the music box. There was a time for things. By the end of her 4th day in the cabin, she had found 7 hiding places. She knew there were more. She was certain. And then, on the 5th morning, the silver sedan came up the road. She was on her knees in the front garden pulling weeds. She had ordered seed packets from Ruth's store. She didn't know if she'd plant them, but she had cleared the soil, and now her hands were dirty, and she was thinking about tomatoes. She heard the engine first. She looked up. The silver sedan came around the bend slow. It stopped behind her Honda. It idled for a long moment. The driver did not get out right away. Sloane stood up. She wiped her hands on her jeans. And then the driver's side door opened. Adele Brennan stepped out. She was wearing a coat Sloane recognized. Sunglasses, even though the sky was overcast. Her hair was different, pulled back, tighter. Like she had done it 3 times to get it right. She stood beside the car for a long moment, looking at the cabin, looking at the porch, looking at the carved trim above the door. Her mouth was a thin line. The passenger door stayed shut. Roy was inside. Sloane could see him through the windshield, looking at his phone, not even bothering to look up at the house his stepdaughter had just been left. Adele walked up the path slow. She stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, looked up. Sloane stood 3 feet above her on the porch boards she had sanded with her own hands, holding a trowel, dirt on her knees. The yellow blanket folded over the railing behind her. 18 years old, standing in front of a mother who had stamped 15 letters returned to sender in red ink. The two of them looked at each other for a long time. Neither of them spoke. The wind moved through the oak tree in the backyard. Finally, Adele lifted her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. She had not slept. "We need to talk," Adele said, "about your grandfather's property." Sloane did not move, did not blink, did not invite her up. Inside the cabin, on the kitchen table, the music box sat next to a folded letter from a man Adele had spent 15 years pretending was dead. Out in the garden, a packet of tomato seeds. On the porch railing, a yellow blanket Eli had bought for a granddaughter he never met. In a wardrobe in Ruth Calloway's storeroom, a doll an 8-year-old never received. And in her own pocket against her hip, the leather notebook from the bedroom windowsill, unread, waiting. Sloane Brennan looked at her mother, the woman who had let her sleep in a car for 3 nights, the woman who had stood at a sink washing a clean pan while her daughter walked out the door. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She just said very quietly the only thing she had to say. "You came a long way," Sloane said, "to talk to a dead man's granddaughter." Adele's hand went to the porch railing, like a woman who needed something to hold. And on the dirt road behind them, a second engine came around the bend. Ruth's truck, coming up the hill. Sloane did not turn around. She kept her eyes on her mother, because the cabin behind her had been built by a man who never stopped trying. And Sloane Brennan, for the first time in her life, understood exactly what that meant. Ruth's truck stopped behind the silver sedan. She did not get out. She just sat there, engine running, one hand on the wheel, watching. Adele looked back over her shoulder, saw the truck, saw the woman in it, did not recognize her, but understood the way women always understand each other. In moments like this, that this was not a coincidence. This was a witness. This was somebody who had come to stand on the granddaughter's side of the porch. Adele turned back to Sloane. "Can I come up? How did you find me?" "The lawyer's office. They called the house." Sloane looked at the silver sedan, at the man inside it, still on his phone, still not bothering. "Roy can stay in the car." Sloane. Roy can stay in the car. Adele closed her eyes for a moment. Then she nodded. She climbed the porch steps slowly. She looked at the railing, the new post, the sanded wood. She ran her hand along it the way a person touches a thing they don't understand. "Did you do this?" "Most of it. Hollis Coleman helped." "Who is Hollis Coleman?" "A friend of Eli's. He was up here yesterday. Brought me a 4x4. Showed me how to set a post." Adele's hand stopped moving on the rail. She did not look at her daughter. She just stood there. Hand on the railing, eyes on the wood. The way a person stands when they realize all at once that the world has been turning without them. Sloane gestured to the wooden chair, the one she had been afraid to sit in for 2 days, the one she now sat in every morning with her coffee. "Sit," she said. Adele sat. She looked very small in the chair. Sloane stayed standing, leaning against the railing, the trowel still in her hand because she had forgotten she was holding it. "You have a week here?" Adele asked. 5 days. 5 days. Adele looked around the porch, at the trees, at the dirt road, at the truck still idling at the bottom of the drive. "I didn't know this place existed. Not until the lawyer called." "I know. He told me Eli left everything to you. The cabin, the land, everything. I'm his next of kin. He made sure of that." Adele's mouth tightened. "I'm not here to fight about the will." "Then why are you here?" A long pause. A long pause where the wind moved through the oak tree and Ruth's engine ticked in the cool air, and a single bird called out somewhere up the ridge. "Because I'm broke," Adele said. Sloane stared at her. "I'm broke, Sloane. Roy is broke. The house is going into foreclosure. I have $80 in my checking account. The mortgage is 3 months behind." "What?" "Roy was. Roy has been gambling." The trowel slid out of Sloane's hand. It hit the porch boards with a small, dull sound. Neither of them looked down. For how long? 11 years. 11 years. 11. Adele said it the way people say a number they have practiced saying. The way you say a number to a doctor when you are finally telling the truth. "He has $80,000 of debt. There is nothing left in my savings. I sold my mother's ring last month." Sloane's mother's mother. The grandmother Sloane had barely known. Dead when Sloane was 9. Adele had worn that ring on her right hand for as long as Sloane could remember. "I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to know. You threw me out." "He threw you out. You stood at the sink." "I know." Adele's voice broke for the first time. Just a small crack. Just one syllable. "I know I did." Sloane sat down. Not in the wooden chair. On the porch boards. Cross-legged. Like a child. Because her legs would not hold her anymore. And she did not want her mother to see it. She looked at her mother across the porch for the first time in 18 years. She was looking at her mother as a person. Not a parent. Not an authority. A person. A woman who had lost her husband at 24 and married the wrong man at 27 and spent 11 years watching that man drain her bank account, lose her mother's ring, and finally throw her child out of the house because he was running out of places to hide. A woman who had stamped 15 letters. Returned to sender in red ink because reading them would have meant feeling something, and feeling something was the thing she could not afford. Sloane did not feel forgiveness. She felt something stranger. She felt the absence of hate. It surprised her. She had expected hate to come rushing in. She had practiced it on the drive up. She had imagined this conversation 100 times in the last 5 days. But sitting on the porch with the woman in front of her, the hate did not come. There was only this hollowed-out quiet, this small, clear space where the hate should have been. She didn't know what to do with that. She didn't have time to figure it out, because the passenger door of the silver sedan opened, and Roy got out. He climbed the porch steps 2 at a time. He did not ask permission. He did not stop at the bottom. He came up like a man who had been chewing on the inside of a car for half an hour and was finally going to say what he came to say. This has gone on long enough. He stopped on the top step. He looked at Sloan, then at Adele, then back at Sloan. We drove 5 hours up here. You're acting like your mother's a stranger, like she did something to you. Whatever this little fantasy is, this grandpa in the woods, it's time to grow up. Roy. Don't Roy me, Adele. I am tired of this. He turned to Sloan. Whatever that old drunk left you, it's not going to be enough to ride out on. You think a shack in the woods makes you somebody. You think a couple of birthday cards in a wall mean anything. He had seen the cards through the open front door, stacked on the kitchen table. He had seen them and he had decided they were nothing. Sloan stood up, slowly. She had grown up around this man. She knew every register of his voice. She knew when he was about to slam a door. She knew when he was about to throw a remote. She knew the way his face flushed up from the collar of his shirt. His face was flushing now. But Sloan was 18, and she was not in his house anymore. She was on her own porch, in front of her own door, in a town where 3 people had brought her food in 5 days, and 1 man had taught her to set a post. "You need to leave," she said. "You don't talk to me like that. You need to leave, you ungrateful little. We took care of you for 11 years. We fed you. We put a roof over your head. You think you can just walk out and play house in a dead man's cabin and forget where you came from?" Roy. That was Adele. She had stood up from the wooden chair. She was looking at her husband the way a person looks at a stranger who has just shouted in their kitchen. "Stay out of this, Adele. Roy, get back in the car. You stay out of this." He stepped toward Sloan. Just 1 step. But Sloan saw the second engine before he did. She had been waiting for it without knowing she was waiting for it. The dirt road behind the silver sedan. Another truck coming up. Older. Dark green. The lumber bouncing in the bed. Hollis Coleman pulled in behind Ruth. He got out slow. He didn't say anything. He just walked up the road, stopped beside Ruth's truck, folded his arms, and on the road behind him, a station wagon. 1996. Margie Doyle behind the wheel. She didn't get out either. She just parked. Cut the engine. Stayed. 3 vehicles. 3 people on the road. None of them moving toward the porch. None of them speaking. Just there. Witnesses. A small town standing on its land for a girl whose grandfather they had loved. Roy looked back over his shoulder. He saw them. His mouth opened. His mouth closed. The color drained out of his neck like water leaving a sink. "Adele," he said, "let's go." Adele didn't move. She was looking at the 3 trucks on the road, at the way nobody on those trucks had said a word, at the way they had simply come, like the cabin had a bell only certain people could hear, and when it rang they showed up. She was looking at the math of her own life. She had stood in a kitchen at the sink 5 days ago. Nobody had come for her. She had stood at that sink for 11 years. Nobody had come for her. Her daughter had been in this cabin for 5 days, and 3 trucks had appeared on a dirt road without being called. Roy. Her voice was different now. Get in the car. Excuse me. Get in the car. Or walk. Roy stared at his wife. Adele Brennan, who had spent 11 years folding dish towels and washing clean pans, looked her husband in the eye for the first time in maybe a decade. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. I said, get in the car. Roy got in the car. He slammed the door so hard the sedan rocked on its suspension. He started the engine. He waited for her. Adele did not turn around. She sat back down in the wooden chair. After a moment of waiting, Roy reversed down the dirt road. Hard. The tires kicked gravel against the underside of the sedan. He turned around at the wide spot. He drove away. The 3 trucks on the road did not move. They watched until the silver sedan was gone. Then Ruth Calloway opened her door and got out of her truck. She did not come up to the porch. She just walked over to Hollis and Margie, and the 3 of them stood by the trucks. And they waited. Because this was not their conversation yet. This was a conversation between a mother and a daughter, and they would stand on the road as long as it took. Adele Brennan sat in the chair her father-in-law had built. She did not look at her daughter. She looked at her hands. They were small hands. Sloan had not noticed before how small they were. The hands of a woman who had been a girl once 24 years old, sitting in a hospital waiting room while a doctor told her that her husband had not survived the fall. He kept the gambling from me for years, Adele said. I didn't find out until 5 years in. By then, he had run through my savings. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could pay him off, get him into a program. I co-signed a loan. He defaulted. The collectors came to the house. The bank came to the house. I started picking up extra shifts. I sold things. Adele looked at her own bare right hand, the pale band on her finger where the ring used to be. I sold things I shouldn't have sold. Sloan sat back down on the porch boards. She did not interrupt. I have spent 15 years, Adele said, punishing a man for being alive when my husband wasn't. I knew Eli was alive. I told you he was dead because I couldn't say his name out loud. Every time I tried, I saw Caleb. Caleb on a hospital gurney. Caleb at 24. Caleb at every age he never got to be. I sent the letters back because I couldn't read them. I knew if I read one, I would fall apart and never come back. So I stamped them. Every single one. I told myself I was protecting you. From him being sober. From him being a good man. From him being your only living family on your father's side. A small sound came out of her. Half a laugh, half a sob. I was protecting myself. Sloan did not answer. I knew Roy was a bad man, Adele said. I knew within the first year. I knew within the first month, if I'm honest. But I had already buried one husband. I was not going to be the woman who failed at 2 marriages by 30. I was not going to be the woman who couldn't keep a man. So I stayed. And I watched him do what he did. and I let you become the place where my whole life leaked out. Sloan looked up. I didn't deserve that. I know you didn't. I was a child. I know. You knew he was hurting me. Adele closed her eyes. Yes. You watched. Yes. You washed the pan. I washed the pan. The wind moved through the oak tree. The three people on the road stood very still. Sloan drew in a long breath, held it, let it out slow. I want you to know something, she said. I'm not going to take care of you. Adele opened her eyes. I'm not going to give you Eli's money. I'm not going to let you stay in this cabin. I'm not going to let Roy near anything that has my name on it. Sloan's voice was steady. I'm 18 years old. I have a place to live for the first time in my life. I have people who came to a porch for me. I'm not going to spend that on you. I'm not asking. You drove 5 hours. I drove 5 hours because I didn't know what else to do. I'm not asking you for the money. I'm asking you to... I don't know what I'm asking. She put her hands over her face. She had still not cried. Not really. Adele Brennan was a woman who had not cried in public for 15 years. But she was getting close. I think I'm asking you to know, she said, that I'm sorry. That's all. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to take me in. I'm asking you to know that I see what I did. To you. And to him. To Eli. She lowered her hands. I never read the letters, but I read them yesterday. The lawyer, Mr. Hale. He called me. He has copies. He read me 3 of them on the phone. He shouldn't have. He shouldn't have. He did. He said, Adele, you need to hear what your father-in-law wrote. What did he read? He read the one from your 8th birthday. He read the one from your 10th. He read the last one, from the year you turned 17. Sloan went still. I didn't know there was one for 17. Adele looked at her. There is. There's a whole stack the lawyer has. Eli left him copies of everything in a sealed packet. Open only if Adele ever asks. That's what was written on the outside. Mr. Hale opened it yesterday. Because I asked. You asked. I called him this morning, before we drove up. I asked him what was in those letters. I asked him. Her voice broke. Really broke this time. I asked him what kind of man my husband's father had become. Sloan did not move, and he read me 3 letters, and then he told me about the trust, about the bonds, about the wardrobe in the storeroom. He told me about the wardrobe Sloan, full of things he bought for you. I sat in my kitchen at 8 a.m., and the lawyer told me about a wardrobe in a storeroom in Cedar Falls that an old man kept for 15 years. Tears were sliding down her face now, her face. Not the controlled tears of a woman who knew how to manage her face. Real tears. The ugly kind. The kind a person cries when something inside them has finally given way. He was here, in this town, buying coats in 12 different sizes. For a child, I would not let him touch. She made a sound, a wet, broken sound. He was a better mother than I was. Sloane did not answer. She did not have an answer. She just sat on the porch boards and watched her mother cry. Watched the years come out of her sideways. Watched the small 24-year-old widow who had been buried inside this woman finally make her way up to the surface. After a long time, Sloane stood up. She went inside. She came back out with a glass of water. She handed it to her mother. Adele took it with both hands. It was not forgiveness. It was a glass of water. But she took it. They sat on the porch until the light got low. Adele drank the water. She did not ask for the cabin. She did not ask for money. She did not ask for anything. After a while, she just said, "I'm going to leave him." Sloane looked at her. "You should." "I don't have anywhere to go." "You have a sister." "I called her this morning, too. She said, 'The couch is mine.'" "Then go to the couch." "For how long?" "For as long as it takes." Adele nodded. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She stood up slowly. She set the empty glass on the porch railing. She looked at the cabin one more time. The trim above the door. The new post. The yellow blanket folded on the railing. The kitchen table inside just visible through the open front door with the wooden music box sitting on it. She looked at her daughter. "He was a good man," she said. "Yes. I'm sorry I didn't let you know him." "I know." "I'm sorry, Sloane." "I know." Adele walked down the porch steps. The three people on the road did not move as she passed. They did not speak to her. They did not greet her. They simply parted the way a small crowd parts for someone who has not earned a welcome. Adele walked to her silver sedan. She opened the door. She got in. She started the engine. And she drove away down the dirt road alone, without saying a word. The three trucks stood on the road until the sedan was gone. Then Ruth Calloway walked up the porch steps. She did not say anything either. She just sat down in the wooden chair where Adele had been sitting. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked at Sloane the way a grandmother looks at a girl who has just done a hard thing well. Hollis Coleman and Margie Doyle stayed on the road. They were not going anywhere either. Sloane sat down on the porch boards in front of Ruth. She put her head against Ruth's knee. Ruth's hand came down, settled on her hair. Steady, light, warm. "There now," Ruth said. That was all she said. There now. Sloane closed her eyes, and for the first time in 5 days, for the first time in 18 years maybe, she let somebody else hold the weight for a minute. The lawyer called the next morning. Sloane was on the porch with coffee. "Miss Brennan, there's one more thing." "Okay. Your grandfather left a package with me. He gave it to me 3 years ago. He said, 'Martin, give this to her after she's been in the cabin a week.' I'm holding to that. Today's the day." "What is it?" "I think you should come down to the office." She drove into town. The main street was quiet. Saturday morning. The bell over the law office door rang as she stepped inside. Martin Hale was older than she had imagined on the phone. White hair, tortoise-shell glasses. The kind of man who had probably been the only lawyer in this town for 40 years. He stood up when she came in. He shook her hand. You look like him. Like Caleb. Like Eli. The set of your shoulders. The way you walk in. He had her sit. He went to a back room. He came out with a sealed manila envelope, yellowed at the edges. 3 years old. Eli's handwriting on the front. For Sloan. Open after 1 week. Inside the envelope was a smaller box, about the size of a paperback. Sloan opened it on the lawyer's desk. Inside were 2 things. A stack of savings bonds. 15 of them. Issued 1 per year. All in her name. And a cassette tape. Just one. Old. The plastic case faded. A label in Eli's handwriting for Sloan. Play when you're ready. She held the tape in her hand. She did not say anything. The lawyer did not say anything. Then he opened a drawer of his desk and pulled out a small portable cassette player, the kind people used in the 1990s. He set it on the desk and pushed it gently toward her. He left this with me too. Said you might need it. He stood up. I'll be in the back office. Take all the time you need. He closed the door behind him. Sloan sat alone in the lawyer's office. She put the tape in the cassette player. She pressed play. There was a long stretch of hiss. Then a chair creaked. Then a man cleared his throat. And then, for the first time in 18 years, she heard her grandfather's voice. It was lower than she had imagined, rough at the edges. The voice of a man who had spent 40 years working outside. The voice of a man who had not used it much in the last few years. Sloan, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for that. I was hoping to meet you. I was hoping I'd get to hear you say your own name to me. I never did get to. But that's all right. A pause. A small chuckle. Old men don't always get what they want. She could hear him breathing. She could hear the cabin around him in the recording. The same cabin she was sitting in. The small creaks. The wind. The kettle on the stove, somewhere in the background, whistling once and stopping. I want to tell you a few things. Your father, Caleb. He was the best person I ever made in my life. And I didn't make him alone. His mother, your grandma Eleanor, she left when he was 9. She had her reasons. I won't speak ill of her. But after that, it was me and him. And I want you to know, he was kind. He was funny. He never cut a corner in his life. When he was 12 years old, he found a stray dog and walked 4 miles to find its owner because he knew somebody was missing it. That was your daddy. He loved your mother, Adele. He met her at a wedding and he came home that night and he said, "Dad, I just met the girl." He was 20 years old. He never looked at another woman after that. And he loved you. Oh, Sloan. He loved you. From the first ultrasound, he loved you. He used to put his hand on your mother's belly, and he'd say, "Slow Marie," like he was tasting it. He was so proud the day you were born. I held you when you were a week old. You grabbed my finger so tight I laughed out loud. Your daddy laughed too. He said, "See, Dad, she knows you." A long pause, a sniff. He was crying. I'm gonna tell you something now, and I want you to hear me clear. Your father didn't die because of you. He didn't die because of your mother. He didn't die because of anybody but the men who put a bad scaffold up on a high-rise job. They paid what they had to pay. Life goes on. But for a long time, I thought your daddy died because of me, because of my heart, because of my surgery, because he took that job to pay for me. And that thought ate me for 2 years. I drank to make it stop. I drank until I scared everybody in my life. I scared your mother. She got a court order. She was right to do it. I want you to know that. She did not steal you from me. She protected you from a man I was not proud to be. I got sober 8 months after that court order. I have been sober for the rest of my life. A pause. Your mother didn't let me come back. And I don't blame her for that either. I might have done the same in her place. She was 24. She had a baby. She had a dead husband. She had a father-in-law who had been at her door drunk. She did what she had to do. The years after that, the fight, the lawyers, the letters, the court. I did all of that because I had to. Because Caleb made me promise. Because I am your blood, and you are mine. But Sloan, I want you to hear this part of it from me. Don't hate your mother. I know what she did. I know she sent the letters back. I know she told you I was dead. Ruth probably told you all that by the time you hear this. She probably told you the rest too. But your mother lost the same boy I did. And not everybody knows how to carry a thing like that. Some people get bigger after they lose someone. Some people get smaller. Your mother got smaller. That's not a sin. That's just a sad thing. If you can, be the one in this family who doesn't pass it down. You don't have to forgive her. You don't owe anybody your forgiveness, but don't let your heart go hard like hers did. That's the only thing I'm asking. From the other side of the dirt, that's what I'm asking. Keep your heart soft, Sloan. Keep your heart soft. A long silence. The chair creaked again. The cabin's yours. The land's yours. The money's yours. There's about 47,000 in savings bonds. I bought one every year of your life. They're not a lot, but they'll get you started. You go to school if you want to. You learn a trade if you want to. You sit on that porch and look at the trees if that's what you need. There's no wrong way to use what I left you. One more thing. Your daddy and I built that porch the year before he died. We built it on a weekend in October when the leaves were all turned. He was 23. He cut every board for that porch with his own hands. He hammered most of the nails. So when you sit on that porch, just so you know, you're not just sitting on something I made. You're sitting on something he made too. I love you, Sloan Marie. I have loved you every day of your life. I am loving you right now from whatever side of this thing I'm on. Go on now. Live. The tape ran on for another minute. Just the hiss. Just the cabin in the background. Just a man breathing. Then a click. And silence. Sloane Brennan sat in the lawyer's office. She did not move for a long time. She listened to it 3 times. The third time, she let it play to the end of the tape and beyond. She let the hiss go on. She let the silence at the end of his voice fill the room, because his voice was the last thing he had given her, and she was not in a hurry to stop hearing it. 3 months later, the cabin had curtains. Sloane had sewn them herself, by hand. White cotton with a thin blue stripe. The hems were uneven and the stitching wandered. They were the most beautiful curtains she had ever seen. The porch was finished, every board replaced, the railing stained, the new post solid under her hand. Hollis had been up 6 times to teach her things, and she had been down to his shop in town 8 times to learn more. He had told her the last visit that she had the makings of a real carpenter. He had not said it sentimentally. He had said it the way men in this town said important things. Flat. True. She had enrolled at the community college 20 miles east. Design and woodworking. 2 classes plus a workshop. The savings bonds were paying for it. She worked weekends at Ruth's store. She joined the volunteer fire department. She was learning to use a router and a joiner. And on a Saturday morning in late spring, with the bell over the door ringing behind her, a girl walked into Ruth's general store. 16, maybe 17. Thin jacket, backpack over one shoulder, hair pulled back tight. She stood just inside the door and scanned the store the way a person scans a room when they are not sure they are welcome. Sloane recognized her without recognizing her. The rigid shoulders, the way she held herself ready to leave. The careful, quiet alertness of somebody who had learned to take up as little space as possible. The girl walked to the back of the store. She stood in front of the sandwich cooler. She counted the money in her hand. She put the money back in her pocket. She turned to leave. "Hey." The girl stopped. "You want a sandwich? I don't have enough." "I didn't ask if you had enough. I asked if you wanted one." The girl looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Just a little. Like she was afraid the offer would be pulled back. Sloane came around the counter. She opened the cooler, pulled out a turkey sandwich and a bottle of water. She rang them up with her own money. She slid them across the counter. "Sit," she said. She pulled a wooden stool over to the front window. "Take your time." The girl sat down. She unwrapped the sandwich slowly. She did not look up. Sloane went back to stocking shelves. She did not ask where the girl was from. She did not ask if she was okay. She just let her eat. In the back of the store, Ruth Calloway was leaning in the doorway of the storeroom, hands in her apron pockets, watching. After a while, she came up the aisle. She stood next to Sloane. She picked up a can of green beans. She set it on the shelf. "Eli would have done that," Ruth said. "I know. He would be proud of you, Sloane." "I know." Ruth squeezed her arm. She walked back to the counter. When the girl finished the sandwich, she folded the wrapper neatly. She put it in the trash can by the door. She came up to the counter. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Sloane pulled a piece of paper from the notepad next to the register. She wrote her number on it. She slid it across the counter. "My name is Sloane. I'm here most weekends. If you need anything, a meal, a ride, a place to sit for an hour, you call." You don't have to explain anything, you just call. The girl looked at the paper. She put it in her jacket pocket. She did not say anything. She did not need to. She walked out the door. The bell rang above her. Sloane stood at the front window and watched her cross the parking lot. She watched until the girl was gone. She did not know if she would ever see her again. She did not need to. Some people you save for one afternoon. Some people you save for years. Some people you don't save at all. But they remember somebody offered them a sandwich once. She turned back to the counter. She kept working. That evening, Sloane sat on the porch, the rocking chair her mother had sent. Adele had not come back to Cedar Falls. Not yet. She had moved to her sister's couch in another state. She was working 2 part-time jobs. She had filed for divorce. She called Sloane every Sunday. Sometimes they talked for 10 minutes. Sometimes they talked for 40. Last week, Adele had asked if she could come visit in the summer, just for a day, just to see. Sloane had said yes, carefully, with conditions, without expectations. But yes, the mother she remembered from before Roy, the mother who had touched her hair and held her hand in parking lots, that mother might not exist anymore. Or she might. Sloane did not know yet. She was willing to find out. That was what Eli had asked. Don't let your heart go hard. She was trying. She wasn't perfect at it. Some mornings she woke up angry. Some nights she lay in bed and thought about a sink full of clean pans and red ink on white envelopes, and she felt her chest tighten. But she did not let it stay. She got up. She drank coffee on the porch. She put her hands on wood. She built something. And slowly, the hard places softened. The sun was dropping behind the ridge. The sky was orange. The oak tree in the backyard moved in the wind. The same oak tree her grandfather had sat under. The same oak tree probably that her father had climbed as a boy. She wound the music box. She set it on the porch railing. The lullaby played out into the evening. Plink, plink, plink. She looked at the porch boards under her feet. The boards her father had cut. The nails her father had hammered. She put her hand flat against the wood for a moment, felt the warmth still in it from the day's sun. "I'm here, Dad," she said. The music box played on. "I'm here, Grandpa." The wind moved through the oak tree. A bird called once, went silent, and Sloane Brennan, 18 years old, sat on a porch built by 2 men who had loved her enough to make a place for her in the world. And she rocked slow and she did not cry. And the cabin behind her was full of light. And she was home.